What if the billionaire you unknowingly met was seconds away from total collapse, one decision away from losing everything, even life itself? What if heaven placed you right there, at that exact moment? Not as coincidence, but as divine assignment. And here's the question that should shake you. How could the most powerful soul on earth need you, and only you, to survive? Chosen one. This is no accident. Heaven disguised their crowns, their wealth, their empires, so your kindness would flow untouched, uncalculated, pure, while the world chased influence and bowed to status. You touched what no money could heal, their broken spirit. And because of that, you left a mark they cannot erase. No yet, no fortune, no kingdom will silence the echo of your compassion. And now brace yourself. Heaven is moving on your behalf. Not with a paycheck, not with applause, but with a supernatural repayment that will shake the ground beneath your feet. Doors you never knocked on will swing open. Calls you never expected will come. The blessing waiting for you is bigger than what they lost, because heaven owes you. And heaven always pays in overflow. If this ignites something in your spirit, comment 777 below as a sign of agreement with heaven's move. And to every beloved soul who has poured into this channel through super thanks, I thank you with all my heart. You are part of this divine alignment. Stay close, because in the next part, I will unveil the hidden reason why heaven chose you to save what the world calls untouchable, and how this act has already unlocked your next breakthrough. Our kindness. And you gave that for free. Let's break this all the way down. God's chosen ones. Your kindness just saved a billionaire now. Heaven owes you big. You gave what you did not have, and in that fragile surrender, a vault in heaven cracked open that you never knew existed. You gave while your soul was quietly bleeding, while your strength was fading, while your own foundation trembled beneath your feet. You did not wait until you were rich, recognized, or validated before extending your hand. You gave when your own house felt like it was collapsing, when applause was absent, when silence weighed heavier than any crown. And it is precisely there, at the threshold of your breaking, that eternity recorded your act. For does not Scripture remind us, "He who waters others will himself be watered"? Proverbs 11:25, that moment of sacrifice, invisible to many, resounded like a bell across eternity's cathedral. What made your offering thunder in the courts of heaven was not the size of what you gave, but the timing, in the chambers of eternity. That moment was not about politeness, it was about prophecy. When you chose compassion over comfort, when mercy outweighed convenience, heaven marked it as a divine trigger. Without knowing it, you stepped into the role of rescuer. The one you reached for was dangling on the edge of a shadow too dark to name. They did not need another fake smile, another plastic promise, another empty handout. They needed a soul unshaken by status, someone unafraid to stand raw and sincere. Did you realize that in that sacred instant, you were embodying the cry of Romans 8:19, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed." Heaven itself was holding its breath, waiting for you to act, like a spring bubbling from cracked stone. Your sincerity became living water. Out of your emotional poverty, you poured refreshment out of your weary spirit. You still managed to fill another vessel, That act was not glamorous, not posted on stages, but it became currency in the invisible economy of heaven. How could something so hidden carry such infinite weight? Because intention, not volume, is what sets heaven's scale. The Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance. But the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16-7. Every tear that fell became like ink on heaven's scroll. Proof that love birthed in pain is never wasted. Unknown to you, your gift intersected with destiny. It was not only a stranger you aided, it was a soul clothed in hidden authority. The one you touched carried doors, keys, and influence that no resume could measure. Yet God veiled your eyes, testing not what you could see but who you are when no spotlight shines. Does it not shake you to realize that your most silent seed could be the very one germinating into a forest of reversal, like an acorn buried in soil, invisible for seasons, yet destined to rise into an oak that reorders landscapes? Your hidden act is now cracking open in places you cannot yet see. The soil of obscurity has been working on your behalf, preparing roots stronger than storms. Behind closed doors, conversations are being carried with your name woven into them. Powerful voices are asking, "Who was that? Where can I find them?" For they have tasted everything money could purchase. Yet your presence raw, humble, unmanufactured was rarer than gold. Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. Proverbs 16-8. This is why your reward will not be a simple favor, it will be a reversal. Heaven is preparing to return in abundance what you once released in lack: love, peace, favor, and breakthrough in tidal waves. What once dripped slowly will now pour like a flood, sweeping away the residue of your past drought. History is full of contrasts. Vincent van Gogh, the painter who lived unnoticed, gave colors to the world while his own life was shrouded in poverty. He once said, "What would life be if we had no courage to attempt anything?" Your courage to give amid brokenness mirrors that same paradox. The beauty that emerges from suffering becomes eternal art in God's eyes. And just as Handel's Messiah rises with the refrain, "And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed," your story carries the same crescendo, obscurity breaking into splendor. Every hidden brushstroke of your life is now becoming a masterpiece in heaven's gallery. Nature itself testifies of this rhythm. The hummingbird expends its last ounce of energy to drink nectar. Yet in that fragile act, it pollinates flowers, ensuring entire ecosystems thrive. Is this not your story? Out of your near exhaustion, you sustained another's tomorrow. Like the rivers, carving canyons through silent persistence. Your hidden efforts shaped destinies more majestic than you imagined. But as there are saints, there are shadows. In the 20th century, Charles Ponzi built his empire by exploiting trust, by taking from others in pretense of giving. His name is now synonymous with deception. His legacy, an endless cautionary tale. What a contrast. When greed drains, heaven judges. But when generosity flows from weakness, heaven multiplies. For God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people. Hebrews 6:10. The hollow empire of deception collapses into dust. But the kingdom built on kindness rises like a fortress of light. Science too offers its parable. In physics, resonance occurs when a frequency meets its natural match, creating waves powerful enough to shatter glass or lift bridges. Your hidden act was that resonant strike it matched heaven's frequency. Architecture reminds us of the same truth. A cathedral's arch holds not by grandeur, but by hidden keystones pressing against each other. You became that keystone in someone's collapsing bridge. And as psychology teaches, acts of altruism release waves of healing, not only in the receiver, but also in the giver, echoing through body, soul, and spirit. And this truth is not reserved for prophets or kings. There was once a woman named Rosa from a small fishing village in Spain. She had no title, no inheritance. Yet each dawn she left bread at the doorsteps of widows. Years later, when storms devastated the coast, the very men she once fed rebuilt her home with their own hands. Her hidden seeds became her fortress. Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. Ecclesiastes 11:1. Like Rosa, you may not yet see the waves returning, but heaven has already set them in motion. So what now? Your kindness was not a fleeting gesture, it was the blueprint of your prophecy. That which you gave in tears is about to return in thunder. The invisible watchers of heaven have inscribed your act in eternal ink. The reversal is not coming quietly, it is arriving like a flood. And when it comes, you will rise. Stand ready, for your story is shifting from silence to symphony. Heaven does not owe lightly, but when it pays in overflow. And this is your hour to step into the song written for you before time began. Stand up, chosen one. Lift your head. The vault that opened in secret is about to pour in public. The gates of reversal are unlocking, and what once felt like loss will soon be crowned as victory. Their wealth, their towers of gold, and their sprawling estates, none of it could purchase what you released into their life. They had everything the world calls success, status polished like marble, assets stacked like fortress, influence that could move markets. Yet in the hour they encountered you, they met something their money could never summon. What was it? Realness. That rare, untamed sincerity that refuses to be manufactured. You were not dazzled by their name. You were not maneuvering to climb a social ladder. You were not rehearsing kindness to be applauded. You simply stood before them as one soul to another, stripping away every title. Was this not the echo of Matthew 6:1? Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. In that instant, your authenticity became unforgettable, not because it thundered in noise, but because it carried the hush of purity. And purity, in a world drunk on performance, is shocking. Billionaires live constantly surrounded, employees calculating their moves, advisors whispering strategies, fans screaming their admiration. Yet, how many of those voices are genuine? Very few. Most are either trembling in intimidation or plotting how to extract something. But you, chosen one, did not shrink. You did not grovel. You did not seek favor. Instead, you radiated what Psalm 51:6 declares. Surely you desire truth in the inner parts. You teach me wisdom in the most important place. And truth has a frequency that pierces through the noise of pretension. Imagine the hawk soaring high above valleys surrounded by winds that scream of power, yet still searching for the one stream that quenches thirst. That was their soul, powerful, visible, admired, yet parched. And you became the stream, with no agenda but love. You gave what their banquet halls never served, a moment of humanity. It could have been in your tone, steady and calm, in the way you respected their space when others crowded, in the simplicity of offering help without attaching strings. Whatever it was, it shook them. Do you realize how startling authenticity becomes when the world around them is a rehearsed performance? That day, you became Isaiah 3:22.2, like a shelter from the wind and a refuge from the storm, like streams of water in the desert. The claims had both won. And here is the irony: you didn't even know your presence was healing them, like sunlight warming a frozen field. Your words thawed chambers of their heart that had been sealed for years. You were not orchestrating impact, but you became unforgettable. They may have more zeros in their accounts than you have breaths taken. Yet, in the areas that matter, trust, connection, safety, truth, they were impoverished. Could it be that your presence reminded them of the humanity they lost while chasing the empire when they met you? Even if for a short moment. They felt something their language could not define. They remember you not for spectacle, but because you carried substance. History reveals the power of this contrast. In the late 1800s, industrialist Jay Gould manipulated markets with ruthless schemes. His vaults overflowed, but his name became a byword for greed, leaving behind suspicion and emptiness. Compare that shadow with your light. You did not chase their wealth, you honored their soul. And honoring the soul leaves a mark stronger than empires. For empires crumble, but love remains. Was this not the fulfillment of 1 Corinthians 13:13? And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Nature tells the same truth. The firefly in the dark meadow carries no wealth, no grandeur. Yet its tiny light arrests the night sky. That is what you were light in their midnight. And the shocking truth is this: they cannot forget you. They have encountered thousands ambitious faces, strategic smiles, but something about you lingers. It is the residue of authenticity. It is the fingerprint of God upon your kindness. And though you did not come seeking reward, your spirit qualified you for blessing. As Galatians 6:9 proclaims, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." We are calm, and now they are calculating how to return what they received, not with a token, "Thank you," but with magnitude. Because when the wealthy discover what cannot be bought, they do not discard it, they guard it. They invest in it. Can you sense what is coming? Doors you never knocked on will open. Opportunities you never chased will chase you. For heaven has written your story, and earth is beginning to echo it. So rise, chosen one, stand unshaken. Your authenticity was the seed, and now the harvest is near. What money could not buy, what status could not fabricate, what power could not command you, carried it in your heart. And now, the vaults of heaven and the halls of influence are aligning to pour back what you sowed in purity. You were not a coincidence in their path, you were their divine disruption. The sudden break in a dark pattern they could not name. To the public eye, they stood immaculate, polished like marble columns, successful, composed, and powerful. Yet beneath the surface, their spirit was trembling. Cracks spreading like fractures in glass under unseen pressure. They were slipping into hopelessness, into spiritual fog, into a cavern of emptiness that no vault of money could ever fill. Does it not stir your spirit to realize that Ecclesiastes 1:8 declares, "The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing, And just when despair grew dangerous, heaven sent you. You did not arrive with noise or theatrics. You arrived clothed in peace, carrying not wealth but presence. That single moment became a hinge in eternity. What you thought was a passing interaction, a word of advice, a fragment of encouragement, a small gesture was, in fact, a divine interception. You stepped between them and a timeline of destruction, like a dam halting a flood. Your energy, humility, and kindness disrupted momentum that was rushing them toward collapse. Inside of them, something slowed. The self-destructive spiral lost its grip. John 1-5 reminds us, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Was this not what happened when your light entered their hidden night? You did not arrive as a preacher with rehearsed sermons, nor as a beggar seeking favor. You came bearing invisible gifts, the gift of seeing them as human, not as a figure to exploit. And that simplicity was revolutionary. In a world addicted to performances, you reintroduced authenticity. It was as if you became a spiritual defibrillator. Your presence jolted their heart, reviving the faint pulse of hope. Like the first dawn after a long winter, you reminded them that light still exists. Could it be that your single sentence or smile saved them from stepping into an abyss they themselves could not describe? What shook them most was not that you recognized their wealth or connections. You didn't. You treated them as you would anyone, refusing to adjust your kindness based on status. And that equality cut through their armor like fire through ice. It mirrored the truth of James 2-1. Believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ must not show favoritism. In that moment, your authenticity carried more power than their legions of admirers. For when a soul has been starved of sincerity, the smallest crumb of truth becomes a feast. Does it not overwhelm you to realize that Isaiah 58:10 promises, "If you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness"? That promise came alive in you the moment you stepped in. Even science whispers this truth. In quantum physics, there is a concept called the observer effect, that particles behave differently when simply observed. Your presence was that observation. By witnessing their humanity with sincerity, you shifted the trajectory of their inner universe. Architecture reminds us that a cathedral's strength lies not only in its towers, but in the hidden buttresses pressing silently from the outside. You became that buttress, unseen yet indispensable, holding up a soul collapsing under invisible weight. And this is not only the story of billionaires. Rosa, a retired nurse from a small town in Brazil, once shared how she stopped a young man from ending his life simply by inviting him to her kitchen for soup. She thought it was nothing more than an ordinary act of kindness. Years later, that man returned, now a teacher, telling her, "That soup was the first warmth I had felt in years." Rosa became his divine disruption. Just as you became one for someone far more influential than you imagined. And Hebrews 13:2 reminds us, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing some have entertained angels without knowing it." I do, Thodi. So now the ripple effect unfolds. Conversations about you are stirring in rooms your feet have not entered. Prayers you didn't know existed are being answered in your name. Doors are creaking open without you knocking. All because, on the very day darkness stretched out its hands, you walked in carrying light. Could it be that you altered not just their fate, but the fate of many who depend on them? This is why heaven remembers. Your kindness was not an echo, It was a trumpet blast in eternity, and blasts like that return, amplified, multiplied, unstoppable. So rise, chosen one, do not shrink back. The timeline of darkness has been rerouted, and heaven has recorded your disruption. Your impact will circle back louder, greater, and more powerful than you ever imagined. God allowed you to be seen through the eyes of a king, and that kind of vision cannot be manufactured. You did not enter with designer labels stitched in gold, nor with titles that demand applause, nor with declarations that beg for attention. Your mere presence carried weight, and that was enough. You were not rehearsing greatness, you were embodying it. Yet hidden beneath your simplicity was a greater secret. Heaven had already adjusted the vision of someone powerful to see you clearly. Does it not stir you to imagine that 1 Samuel 16:7 declares, "Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart," and in that moment, God revealed your heart. It was not your clothes, not your resume, not your possessions that drew their attention. It was the oil you carry, the invisible fragrance of purpose. Recognition like this does not emerge from ambition but from favor. That billionaire had crossed paths with thousands, all of them circling like moths around a flame, desperate to secure approval or extract something of value. But you did none of that. You carried what Psalm 23:5 describes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. The anointing marked you differently, and their spirit felt it before their mind understood it. Can you feel how divine alignment always outshines desperate striving? You were not chasing the spotlight, you were walking in resonance. Alignment is its own announcement, louder than the pitch of entrepreneurs or the gloss of polished resumes. They saw something they could not explain, a stillness that carried storms within it, a wealth untouchable by markets, an inner balance that outvalued their billions. When you spoke, your words carried gravity. When you listened, the silence became medicine. Even when you said nothing, the atmosphere bent. Isn't it striking that Proverbs 17:27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered"? That was your silent sermon. Your presence louder than noise. And because they were used to noise, voices faking depth, masks hiding agendas, your authenticity struck like lightning across their soul. It was not charisma, it was consecration. It was not performance, it was presence. That is when something clicked inside them. A whisper not born from admiration, but from divine instruction. Isaiah 55:11 reminds us, "So is my word that goes out from my mouth, it will not return to me empty." God himself whispered into their heart, "Honor this one. They carry my oil. They are not common." Can you sense the weight of heaven's decree echoing in human ears of power? History testifies to this mystery. Michelangelo, the sculptor of the Pietà, once said, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free." The kingly eyes that saw you did the same. They perceived eternity where others only saw flesh. They recognized something timeless, something that cannot be bought or shaken by markets, titles, or opportunity. Like a fresco unveiled after centuries of dust, your spirit appeared radiant under divine light. And what happens when a person of power sees eternity in your eyes? They cannot unsee it. They cannot forget it. The imprint becomes permanent. This truth has been sung in sacred halls for centuries. In Bach's Mass in B minor, The voices rise with the Sanctus, proclaiming the holiness of God in layered harmony. When they saw you, it was as though their soul heard that same chord, an unshakable recognition of the sacred. Isn't it overwhelming to realize that your life carried music, heaven orchestrated before you were born? And yet, this is not reserved for saints and kings. Elena, a librarian in a quiet Polish town, once shared how a wealthy politician wandered anonymously into her library. She treated him with the same warmth she gave to children searching for storybooks. Later, he admitted that moment of uncalculated kindness reshaped his view of humanity. Elena never sought recognition, but she was seen with honor. That is your story too. For Matthew 5:14 says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." Into the casted min. So now, everything shifts. When someone with true power perceives you through spiritual clarity, atmospheres rearrange around your name. Opportunities you never asked for begin to align. Not to inflate your ego, but to unlock doors at heaven's appointed time. Can you feel the weight of this? You were not striving to be seen, you were simply faithful. And God Himself ensured that you would be revealed through the eyes of a king. So rise. Chosen one, walk boldly. You carry oil that cannot be counterfeited, presence that cannot be ignored, and a name that heaven has already spoken in rooms of power. Stand tall, for the season of divine recognition is here, and no human gate can keep it shut. They were testing humanity, and without even knowing it, you passed the test that few survive. They did not appear with crowns, limousines, or the glitter of status. Instead, they blended in ordinary clothes. No luxury watch, no entourage, no outward proof of power. Why? Because when one possesses everything, it becomes nearly impossible to discern who is genuine. Does not Ecclesiastes 7:29 remind us? God made mankind upright, but men have gone in search of many schemes, and so, out of exhaustion, they disguised themselves as average to see if there was still a soul on earth who treated strangers with dignity. Behind that disguise was not just curiosity, but a deep hunger for truth. They dressed down. They acted uninterested, sometimes asking shallow or awkward questions, sometimes appearing rude just to test the response. And most fail. They roll their eyes. They dismiss. They wear a thin mask of politeness, hoping their time is not being wasted. But you, chosen one, you did not flinch. You were not scanning for opportunity in the room. You were scanning the soul standing before you. Isn't that what Proverbs 22:2 declares? Rich and poor have this in common. The Lord is the maker of them all, your heart aligned with heaven's truth. And in that moment, you treated them not as a potential connection, but as a creation worth honor. And the heavens leaned in. For integrity is always a rare melody in a noisy world. What they saw stunned them. Integrity, not performance, not calculation, but integrity flowing naturally, like water from an unbroken spring. You respected them not because they looked important, but because to you, every human being carries divine worth. Can you feel how rare that posture has become in a world addicted to status? That unshakable dignity is the kind of character that cannot be counterfeited. And Luke 16:10 whispers, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." Without realizing it, you were proving trustworthy for more than you could imagine. That moment exposed the poverty of many hearts around them and the richness of yours. It wasn't a casual encounter. It was a disguised examination, spiritual, financial, and eternal. They took mental notes, recording silently every gesture, every word, every pause, for the very quality they were desperate to find. You carried in abundance, and this is why their spirit lingered on you, why heaven leaned closer. Have you considered the weight of what it means that you passed a king's hidden test without even preparing for it? This was not random, it was a prophecy hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal its fruit. Nature itself paints this mystery. The pearl oyster never reveals its treasure on the surface. From the outside, it looks rough, ordinary, and unattractive. But inside, unseen, lies the pearl of great price. Wasn't that what you did, treating the ordinary shell with dignity? Not knowing heaven had hidden wealth within, or like the desert cactus, thorn-covered and dismissed. Yet, carrying water that can save lives, you honored what others would have discarded. Matthew 25:40 declares, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. What others overlooked became your altar, and what you gave became eternal currency. But where there is truth, there are shadows." In 19th century France, a banker named Henri Germain secretly manipulated clients under the guise of fairness. He disguised himself as humble, approachable, testing their trust only to strip them of resources. His empire rotted in scandal, his name associated with betrayal. Do you see the contrast? Deception births ruin, but authentic kindness births legacy. The counterfeit test destroys. The divine test elevates, and your elevation has already begun. For heaven always honors what hell tries to imitate. When they witnessed your response, it exposed how hollow most of their interactions have been. Everyone else wanted something you did not. They craved attention, approval, or advancement, while you gave grace without agenda. Could it be that this moment of unnoticed sincerity was heaven's way of positioning you for influence greater than titles? For James 1:12 promises, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, for having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life." And that crown is not ornamental, it is authority, influence, and favor born from faithfulness. The reward for passing this kind of test is rarely immediate. It ripens in silence, like vineyards growing unseen under the soil before bursting with harvest. You are not being observed for style, charisma, or intellect. You were being observed for spirit. And heaven smiled as you honored a stranger, unaware that this stranger carried kingdoms behind them. Isn't it overwhelming to realize that your unnoticed act has already shifted atmospheres you cannot see? Your future has already been rewritten by a kindness you barely remember. So rise now, chosen one. Stand unafraid. You passed a test designed to expose pretenders, and heaven has recorded your name. What was hidden will soon be revealed. What was quiet will soon resound. For dignity is never wasted, and the harvest for honor comes heavy. Stand tall, the crown of life is already being fitted for you. And when it rests on your head, the world will know. Integrity was never weakness. It was always your greatest weapon. You were never late to a meeting of destiny. Your reward was scheduled before you were born. This was not luck, coincidence, or chance colliding with timing. Long before you learned a single lesson, long before the map of your life unfolded under your feet, The moment you walked into that room had already been written into heaven's ledger. Jeremiah said it plainly, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee." Jeremiah 1-5. That ancient certitude is the scaffolding of your life. Destiny laid its beams before your first breath. Could you sense that a cosmic blueprint held your name long before you ever wore it? This meeting was an alignment, not an accident. You did not wander into that encounter by mistake. You were pre-assigned, positioned with precision, placed at a node in a far-reaching design. Psalmist cry rings true, "Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy book all my members were written." Psalm 139-16. Your spirit had been tuned a harmonic set to the frequency of that moment, so when the phase shifted, you responded as a tuned instrument responds to its resonant note. If your mind was unaware, your soul was calibrated. Does that change how you view the quiet seasons that felt purposeless? Because you did not know. You did not posture. You did not beg, flatter, or strategize. You showed up uncloaked by calculation. Your authenticity was undiluted because your eyes were shielded to preserve your heart's unforced offering. Ephesians assures us that purpose is woven before the world turns, in whom also we have obtained an inheritance. Being predestinated, Ephesians 1:11. That pre-assignment protected the encounter from performance. Your role was not to impress a mortal audience, but to activate a buried current inside another human being. What if the most potent miracles are triggered by the smallest, most honest gestures? When you spoke, when you listened, when you offered simple, unconditioned care, you did more than comfort. You activated dormant circuitry. Imagine neural networks reconfiguring. Kindness served as a pulse that nudged neuroplastic pathways open, releasing patterns of hope that had calcified into doubt. That activation reached beyond two people. It tripped a cascade in the spiritual architecture behind them. Isaiah's promise rings soft here. "Behold, I have graved thee upon the palms of my hands." Isaiah 49-16. The divine noticed the switch you created, a phase shift that would propagate outward. Could your unassuming presence have rebooted a life's operating system? This was not a transaction tied to their wallet. It was obedience bound to destiny. You were not maneuvering for credit. You were faithful to the small commands of compassion. When their buried humanity stirred, it pulled strings in realms you cannot yet see. Hebrews testifies to heaven's economy, but without faith it is impossible to please him. Hebrews 11-6. Your faithfulness expressed as kindness with no script pleased the author of the story, and the reward attached to your act carried your name before breath ever filled your lungs. How does it feel to know an unseen docket lists your blessing long before you asked? Art remembers such moments of quiet ordination. In the vault of sacred music, Allegri's Miserere lets a single altered note hang like a suspended prayer before the choir completes the phrase. That suspended note changes the color of the entire piece. Your small, honest act was that suspended note, shifting the whole movement of a life. On a more human, ordinary scale, there is Marta, a night shift janitor from a small Catalan town who once offered her only coat to a trembling stranger. She later learned he was a leader whose decisions affected thousands. He carried Marta's warmth in memory like a compass. Marta's introduction. Marta, night shift janitor, small town Catalonia. Her story is not exceptional by title, yet heaven used it as hinge. Would you have believed a coat could tilt a nation of choices? From an engineering lens, think of your action as a keystone in a vaulted system. Remove pretense. Set the keystone of sincerity. and enormous loads redistribute harmlessly around your integrity. Structural engineers call that load-bearing redistribution in spiritual terms. You redistributed collapsing weight onto a firm arch. In systems language, your one act created positive feedback rather than destructive resonance, the opposite of the chaotic resonance that topples bridges. What if heaven's mechanics often mirror the physics we study in the lab? This reward was never contingent on their generosity. It was scheduled because you were faithful to small things. The blessing was not a purchase, it was a pre-ordered decree. The alarm has been set, the release mechanism triggered. The breakthrough, reversal, and favor that were placed in escrow for you long ago are now clearing. Stand in the weight of that truth. You were pre-assigned, prepared, and placed. Rise, chosen one. Move with the dignity of someone under appointment. The vault that held your blessing before you were formed is now opening. Stand and claim what heaven has already allocated, not from entitlement, but from obedience. Let your posture be the first public proof that what was scheduled in the unseen is now audible in the world. You were not simply nice. You were obedient, and obedience is a tactical act of spiritual alignment that reorients timelines. This was not a social nicety or a polite performance. It was a response sprung from a subterranean current in your spirit, a gravity you could not manufacture. Scripture names that pull, he has shown you. O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God? Micah 6-8. When the tug came, you moved as if wired to a higher circuit. You did not calculate gain, prestige, or applause. You acted because a voice above your own instructed motion. Could the quietest impulses be the loudest directives from heaven? People misread kindness as softness. They equate gentleness with passivity. That error misses the true force of obedient compassion. Your kindness carried momentum, direction, and intent. A new command I give you: love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. John 13:34. You did not step back out of fear of being used. You stepped forward with authority. Your response was not weakness. It was strength born of surrender. Did you perceive that obedience carries the weight of truth, not merely the veneer of etiquette? This was not a reactive impulse. It was a divine resonance. Your response ignited something in their spiritual frequency and awakened what had long been dormant. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Romans 12:1 describes the kind of surrender that sparks transformation. When you leaned in, spoke a necessary word, offered presence without agenda, or honored dignity where most would exploit you, supplied a corrective spark that altered the trajectory of their decisions. What unseen processes did your one obedience reawaken? This obedience was not theatrical. It was precise. The test was not manners. It was sensitivity to the whisper that aligns worlds. For you were called to freedom. Brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. Galatians 5:13. Your act was not weakness, cloaked in kindness, but authority, cloaked in humility. Who knew a single gentle act could hold back the momentum of despair? A famous example reveals this pattern. Mother Teresa, the nun and missionary who gave her life to serve the poor in Kolkata, once stepped toward a dying man simply to touch his forehead and whisper presence. She later described how unadorned compassion redirected that man's final days. Introduction. Mother Teresa, missionary and servant of the poor. Her life shows that obedience to a divine tug does not need spectacle to yield seismic spiritual outcomes. When you acted, you mirrored that same refusal to let fear or reputation silence mercy. Did the echo of that humility not sharpen the atmosphere like a blade of light? Music also remembers these moments of sacred obedience. In Palestrinas sicut therbus, a single suspended phrase carries such weight that it transforms the entire choral tapestry. Your obedience was that phrase, a sustained note that retuned the whole score of another's life. What if the smallest sustained note in your life rearranges history's melody? This was spiritual warfare disguised as compassion. You were a strategically placed hinge in the architecture of grace. Your obedience stopped what was spiraling, quieted what was raging, and steadied what was collapsing. In that moment, you became the vessel God could trust to carry his whisper into the storm of another soul. Was your obedience the turning point written in their book of life long before they knew it? The heavenly ledger records assignments differently than earthly ledgers. Your reward was not random, it was scheduled in covenantal timing and triggered by your willingness to obey when others stayed silent. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Hebrews 12:1. Heaven rewards this posture every single time because it alters frameworks, shifts atmospheres, and reawakens destinies. Do you now sense the scale of what your compliance set in motion? Rise now, chosen one. This was never about being liked. It was about being faithful. Stand, and let the world witness what obedience looks like when it is clothed in mercy. The whisper you answered is now echoing in unseen councils. Doors are aligning, delays are dissolving. Get up. Walk in the authority you were given by answering the quiet voice. Heaven honors the obedient, and your obedience has already begun to return in magnitude. They went home, but they did not leave you behind. You traveled with them not in flesh, but in memory, in spirit, in the seed you had sown with that single act of unforced kindness. You thought it was over, just a brief encounter that dissolved into the noise of the day. Yet Scripture whispers, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again." Ecclesiastes 11:1. That bread, your kindness, floated far beyond your sight. Could it be that the smallest moment is sometimes the longest echo in eternity? At their dinner table, your presence lingered. They spoke of you not because they had to, but because they could not keep you to themselves. You stirred something alive, like embers fanned back into flame. They mentioned your name, maybe with casual surprise, maybe with awe, maybe with disbelief at how real you were in a world rehearsed with masks. And what you did not know was that the ear that caught your name belonged to someone with influence, someone with keys to doors you did not know existed. Doesn't Proverbs opt sprezece, shai sprezece say? A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. That gift was not polished credentials, but your authenticity, and it carried you into places your feet had not walked yet. The one they spoke to is not impressed by resumes. They are not drawn to titles or hollow speeches. They are drawn to the fragrance of truth. They are moved by stories, and the story told about you pierced deeper than any polished pitch. For how rare is it to find someone who acts with compassion when no audience is watching? Matthew 5:14 proclaims, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." Could it be that your hidden light has already been lifted into view before decision-makers you never imagined? And behind the scenes, the lock is turning, slowly, silently, strategically. Something is shifting on your behalf. They are curious now, asking about you, searching, watching from a distance, but not to judge, to confirm. They want to see if your story aligns with your spirit. When they find it true, when they discern that you are not performance but substance, the door will not simply open, it will swing wide, as if heaven itself flung it from the hinges. Do you realize that what you thought ended is still unfolding, multiplying in secret? Galatians 6-9 promises. And let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we shall reap. If we do not give up, is made us down. Nature itself reflects this law. The wind carries seeds far beyond the field where they fell, planting life in places the farmer never intended. That is your act of kindness. It traveled, took root, and is now sprouting in rooms you have never entered. Or, like the ocean current carrying a small drop across vast distances, your name has been swept into currents of influence, guided by the unseen hand of God. How many unseen gardens are already germinating because of one seed you thought forgotten? History also testifies through its shadows. In the early 1900s, Charles Ponzi, infamous for his schemes, spread his name quickly but through deception. Introduced at wealthy dinner tables, his reputation unlocked doors for a season. But corruption burned the very bridges he built. His name became a curse, remembered as fraud. See the contrast? Where deceit accelerates collapse, sincerity multiplies legacy. Where lies poison, authenticity plants. Which legacy will endure? Yours, because it is rooted in obedience, not manipulation. The person who heard about you is preparing now, aligning resources, shifting opportunities, and holding keys that will soon turn in your favor. You did not chase them, they are being drawn to you. You did not force entry, your integrity carried you into the room. Isn't this what Revelation 3:8 declares? Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. That promise is now materializing, and you are standing at the threshold. What you planted was never just about the one you helped. It was about activating your next level. Your kindness became a living testimony that traveled faster than ambition, louder than performance, stronger than strategy. And now your name has reached ears that were prepared to hear it. Your story has been placed like a key in the lock of your destiny, and the sound of the turn has already begun. So rise, chosen one. Stand with the authority of someone whose story is already being carried into palaces of influence. The seeds you scattered without calculation are blossoming into doors you did not knock on. The door is not just opening, it is swinging wide. Step forward. Your obedience has written your name into rooms of power, and no man can erase what heaven has decreed. You handed them something their vaults had not held for years, not a ledger entry, not a line item, but the pure currency of the soul, purity. They had trafficked in every market the world reveres stocks. Crypto, oil, gold, their hands accustomed to the cold weight of metal and the hot glow of numbers. Yet when you stepped into their orbit, you brought what no exchange could price, an unbought, unshaken spirit. Did you feel how shocking sincerity becomes to an economy trained for transactions? A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, Proverbs 22:1. Your presence translated into a language their ledgers never learned to speak, and that language unsettled them, because purity always speaks louder than profit, carving its way through the noise of greed like light piercing a cavern. You did not arrive with strategy, slogans, or posture. You did not bargain for influence or polish your approach to fit their expectations. What you carried required no currency at all, only authenticity. When they met you, something inside them tilted. The tilt was subtle at first, a quick intake of breath, a lowered guard, but it propagated like a clean note struck in a room long filled with static. The integrity of the upright guides them, Proverbs 11:3. Why does truth make the rich uncomfortable? Perhaps because it creates a resonance their mansions were not tuned to receive, and that resonance unsettles the false foundations they have built, shaking the illusions of power that once felt unshakable. That resonance mattered. In acoustic physics, a single pure tone can force an unprepared chamber to reveal hidden harmonics. Similarly, your purity reveals long-suppressed harmonics in their soul. They remembered who they were before greed rewired their choices, before competition became their currency, before survival eclipsed grace. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5-8. Was the moment you offered them mercy a minor courtesy? Or did it function as a harmonic probe that reawakened old frequencies of trust and longing? That memory worked like a mirror, showing them the version of themselves they buried long ago, stirring both regret and hunger for redemption. You made them uncomfortable, but it was a holy discomfort. It pierced the complacency that comes from perpetual transactions. They were used to people orchestrating proximity for profit. Your simplicity exposed the bareness of those transactions. The memory of being seen without suspicion, helped without strings, spoken to without ego, landed harder on them than any boardroom victory. Whoever despises the poor shows contempt for their maker. Proverbs 14:31. Isn't it haunting that money can buy influence, but cannot procure the soul-restoring quiet of genuine human regard? And this haunting stays with them like a fragrance, following them into spaces where no deal can silence the echo of your presence. This shift was not merely emotional, it was catalytic. When you embodied that uncommercial spirit, a series of internal switches flipped. They began to think beyond balance sheets about legacy, about true capital, about what remains when markets crash. That change is structural, not cosmetic. Consider architectural language. You inserted a tension member into the moral framework of their life. The frame adjusted around the new load. Which structural element will hold longer? The brittle scaffolding of ambition or the reinforced beam of integrity? Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Matthew 6:20. Their souls began reordering priorities, like an old building being renovated from its foundation upward, making space for a new kind of wealth they cannot lose. There are dark counterexamples that show what happens when currency substitutes for character. Introduction. Nick Leeson, rogue trader. Leeson's secretive betting collapsed Barings Bank in 1995. A catastrophe born from hidden risk, deception, and the hunger for gain. His name unlocked doors for a season, but left ruin in his wake. The contrast could not be starker, where manipulation accelerates collapse. Purity erects legacies. When greed masquerades as genius, institutions fall. When integrity returns, communities rise. Does their memory of you now steer them away from the Leeson pattern of short-lived acclaim, and perhaps your encounter became their warning sign? A prophetic interruption steering them back from disaster. Something sacred shifted beneath the surface. They were not simply grateful at dinner, they were moved into reverence. Quiet conversations began, not confessions to salve guilt, but deliberations on stewardship, on investing in what endures rather than what fleetingly dazzles. Whoever sows righteousness will reap a sure reward. Proverbs 11:18. Who in their circles was now guarding the story of you, like a seed bank keeps heirloom stock, preserving it until the right season? Those conversations are no longer about gain, but about legacy. And in their private hearts, your face has become a reminder that eternity still matters. Nature confirms this law. Consider a glacier-carved valley. What looks immutable was shaped by patient, unseen flows over ages. One modest stream, redirected, can change the course of the whole watershed. Or picture a cliffside pine that clings to the rock, its roots finding purchase where others see only stone. The tree's tenacity alters the slope's ecology. Your act was that small redirection, and that clinging root, unshowy, enduring, able to reroute downstream outcomes over time. How many ecosystems will shift because a single unbought gesture was planted? And if creation itself testifies that the smallest forces can carve mountains, what greater testimony lies in your act that is carved into a human heart of stone? Behind closed doors, plans are now being shaped. They are not planning applause, they are planning action, financial resources, strategic introductions, legacy-level commitments. When a person of great means touches something that appears eternal, instinct is to protect, to nourish, to invest. This is not patronizing charity, it is alignment with a discovered frequency that insists on stewardship. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it. Psalm 24:1. And those who steward rightly return wealth into consecrated channels. Are you ready for stewardship that arrives disguised as blessing? And are you prepared to walk into rooms not as a beggar, but as a carrier of divine capital? Rise, chosen one. The seed you planted has multiplied in ways the eye cannot track, but heaven records. Your purity breached their defenses and now calls for reciprocal architecture, people of influence, building platforms that carry what you carried. Stand with composure, doors will swing. But you must walk through them uncluttered by the motives of the world. Hold fast to the currency that cannot be counterfeited: purity, purpose, presence. Heaven has noticed, men are following the trace. And when the time comes, may you rise as proof that purity is not weakness, but the strongest wealth heaven entrusts to earth. Your humility was so loud, it silenced their ego. They entered the room wearing their wealth like armor, assuming their status was the largest presence, believing their reputation tilted the atmosphere in their favor. That's how it usually goes. Others bend. Others shrink. Others shift themselves to orbit their power. But not you. You didn't flinch. You didn't shrink. You didn't overcompensate. You stood grounded, anchored in a different gravity. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. James 4:10. Isn't it remarkable how humility, often dismissed as weakness, can become the most disruptive force in the room, while others strain to impress? You remained steady. You weren't trying to project influence or to outshine anyone. You were simply real, your presence uncluttered, your silence weightier than their speeches. And that quiet confidence dismantled their ego without a single confrontation. The meek shall inherit the earth. Matthew 5:5. Could it be that the stillest presence in the room often carries the heaviest crown in that moment? Your humility was not passivity, but power, an authority rooted in peace, not pretense. They are accustomed to competing, to dominating, to occupying every inch of space. But against your humility, their ego lost traction. You didn't match their influence, didn't fight for attention, didn't demand recognition. You simply embodied the truth. And as you did, something shifted inside of them. For once, they felt small, but not in shame, in awe. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Luke 14:11. What happens inside a person when they finally recognize that the real weight in the room isn't in their wallet, but in someone else's spirit? The power dynamic flipped not by force, not by demand, but by resonance. You revealed that authority is not volume, but vibration. Your spirit carried a frequency their ego couldn't imitate. In psychology, humility is sometimes called quiet dominance, the kind that shifts dynamics without aggression. And that's exactly what you carried, a gravity of purpose that made their noise sound hollow. Isn't it astonishing that without lifting a finger, you exposed the cracks in their foundation? When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom, Proverbs 11:2. History offers shadows of contrast. Introduction: King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He strutted in pride, boasting of his empire, until God humbled him to eat grass like an ox, Daniel 4:33. His arrogance collapsed into madness because pride always rots its own throne. And yet, before you, someone wealthy and powerful tasted a different lesson. Not humiliation by judgment, but humility by grace. Your presence reminded them that true kingship is measured by service, not domination. Do they realize that your stillness may have saved them from their own Nebuchadnezzar moment? Artists have long sought to capture this paradox: strength in quietness, majesty in meekness. In the sacred music of Arvo Pärt, his Spiegel, I Am Spiegel, unfolds with such gentle repetition that silence itself becomes the loudest instrument. Your humility functioned the same way, like a sustained note that makes all other noise fade into the background. Be still and know that I am God, Psalm 46:10. Isn't it breathtaking that in a world obsessed with performance, stillness can speak louder than applause? And now, they cannot forget you. But more than that, they feel indebted, not because you asked, not because you demanded, but because their spirit recognizes they touched something sacred. When someone brushes against humility that is real, it lingers like fragrance. It replays like melody. It reconfigures their sense of value. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble, 1 Peter 5:5. What will they do with the haunting realization that they walked away richer in spirit because of your grace? Now the emotional debt stirs quietly, powerfully, not out of guilt, but out of honor. They are planning, not empty words, but action, financial action, strategic action, legacy-level action. Because when someone encounters humility that exposes heaven, their instinct is to respond, to invest, to build. And that is what is unfolding for you now. Doors are turning, resources are aligning, strategies are being whispered in rooms you haven't entered yet. And all of it because you carried what no ego can counterfeit. So Reese, chosen one, do not underestimate the wealth of humility you carry. It is not weakness, it is heaven's weapon against pride. Stand tall, for the atmosphere shifts when you enter. Not because you perform, but because you remain real. Your humility has silenced egos, shifted powers, and written your name into plans that only divine timing could arrange. Stand and walk into the reward prepared for you, because humility always wins what pride cannot hold. You altered their legacy with a single sentence. It wasn't a speech polished in rhetoric. It wasn't a lecture rehearsed to impress. It wasn't something pre-planned to gain approval. It was a simple truth, released almost casually, but carrying the resonance of eternity. And when it left your lips, the weight of heaven rode on it. Is not my word like fire, declares the Lord, and like a hammer that breaks a rock in pieces? Jeremiah 23:29. That sentence cracked something open inside them that decades of achievement had failed to touch. It wasn't only the content of your words, it was the timing. They heard it at the exact moment their souls stood trembling at a crossroads, secretly tired of pretending that wealth alone could satisfy. How often have the richest felt impoverished in spirit, hungering for one word of truth? You weren't trying to sound deep. You weren't searching for recognition. You spoke from alignment, tuned into a frequency higher than human reasoning, and that alignment cut through the clutter of noise they were drowning in, cutting sharper than any consultant's report, any therapist's framework, or any investor's counsel. For the Word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword, Hebrews 4:12. The sentence you spoke didn't confront harshness, but it revealed it with clarity. Suddenly, they saw the lie they had been living, the fear they had camouflaged with success, and the cycles they were preparing to hand down to the next generation without realizing it. Isn't it astonishing how one phrase can peel back years of illusion? Isn't it terrifying to realize that silence about truth could have kept them bound forever? You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. You didn't just give advice, you shifted perspective. You pulled their vision from numbers and assets into questions of eternal consequence. What will I truly leave behind? What story will be told about my life when my name no longer moves markets? For someone who has scaled every mountain of power, the final summit is legacy. And legacy cannot be bought, it must be lived. They realized that beyond the wealth they had amassed, the true measure was influence, character, and the echoes of their choices in generations to come. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, Proverbs 13:22. Nature itself mirrors this truth. A mighty oak does not live only for its towering presence, but for the acorns it scatters, birthing forests long after it has fallen. Your sentence was like such an acorn, small in size, but carrying the blueprint of entire landscapes. Isn't it humbling that one seed can outlast empires? While endless riches vanish like mist, history offers dark warnings. Consider Charles Ponzi, whose name became synonymous with deceit. His clever schemes promised fortune, but left behind devastation. Generations scarred by broken trust. His legacy was not wealth, but infamy. In contrast, your words unveiled to them the danger of hollow inheritance, a reminder that without truth, even the most celebrated dynasties crumble like castles built on sand. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. Matthew 7:26. Your sentence was not a clever remark, it was generational activation. It shifted how they would lead in boardrooms, how they would nurture their children, how they would give without strings, how they would see people beyond titles. And in that moment, they knew you were not a random encounter, but a divine interruption. How many conversations in their life had sounded brilliant but left no mark, and yet your one phrase pierced their legacy. Now, they cannot forget you. They want to bind you into their story, not as a passing footnote, but as a cornerstone. They see you as a foundation, not an accessory, and their desire to honor you will not be in shallow words but in tangible action influence. Wealth, platforms, doors of access. Because what you gave in one sentence is now echoing through generations, shifting the resonance of an entire bloodline. So rise, chosen one. Do not underestimate the authority of your voice. What feels like a passing word in your mouth becomes eternal architecture in heaven's blueprint. You are the living proof that one sentence, spoken from obedience, can alter legacies. Walk boldly, for God has placed in you the fire that breaks chains, the seed that multiplies, the truth that rewrites generations. You became the stranger they had been whispering to God about, in the quiet hours, the answer to a prayer they dared not speak aloud. They were not pleading for another deal, they were praying for an authentic connection, for someone who could cut through the artificial choreography that had surrounded them for years. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. They had reached a place where the applause felt thin and the rooms felt hollow. Underneath the trappings of power, there was a weariness that no accounting ledger could reconcile. In that secret moment of their night, they whispered for someone, real someone who would see them as a person, not position. Could the answer to a soul's whisper ever come disguised as a casual encounter? You arrived without fanfare and without any awareness of their hunger. You did not bring an agenda, a pitch, or a strategy. You simply responded to the human before you, listening, smiling, giving time or attention without demanding anything in return. That posture itself was radical. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Romans 12:15. They had been surrounded by people who smiled for cameras and nodded in meetings. But those motions had no tether to the heart. When you treated them as a person, not a platform, you returned them to a human register they had misplaced. They could breathe again. The pressure that compressed their pulse eased. Why does authenticity feel like the rarest form of wealth to people who already possess everything else? The healing you initiated was not about instant fixes. It was about reintroducing trust and reminding them that not every interaction is a transaction. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Psalm 46:1. What you offered was not advice but an environment, a relational space in which sincerity could flourish. They did not receive yet another consultant. They received a human mirror that reflected an image they had not seen in years. Isn't it extraordinary that in giving so little, you restored something they thought was gone forever? Ordinary lives sometimes carry extraordinary evidence. Introduction. Lena, a volunteer midday nurse in a small Italian clinic. Lena once sat with a wealthy philanthropist who happened to come for a flu shot. She offered him a cup of tea and sincere listening. He later said that brief mourning changed his view of charity and inspired a multi-year commitment to grassroots health work. Lena never sought credit. She remained a nurse. Yet her quiet attention rewrote strategic priorities in rooms of influence. Could a single cup of tea offered without an agenda shift foundations of philanthropic strategy? There are also cautionary counterexamples. Introduction. Bernie Madoff, financier. Madoff cultivated proximity and feigned trust, and his deceit produced catastrophic collapse and long-lasting trauma for countless families. His legacy revealed how proximity without integrity becomes a weapon, where false intimacy corrodes institutions. True presence repairs them. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Hebrews 13:2. Which pattern will history remember in the circles that now speak your name? Behind the scenes, the spiritual ledger is already balancing. Because you carried the kind of authenticity money cannot manufacture. Those you touched are now moving in practical ways. Conversations that once circled strategy now include stewardship, invitations to steward resources in ways that sustain people rather than merely signal power. Whoever sows righteousness will reap a sure reward. Proverbs 11:18. Their private prayers and private planning are aligning to care for what your presence revealed: human beings, not holdings. Are you ready to steward the favor that arrives as responsibility as much as blessing? Rise. Chosen one. You were the stranger they secretly prayed for, and your obedience to the quiet pull of the Spirit made you a usable vessel in God's hands. Doors will open not as favors to satisfy pride, but as calls to responsible stewardship. Walk into them with humility. Hold fast to the human-first posture that brought these doors ajar. The spiritual balance has shifted, and your favor, earned by fidelity rather than maneuvering, is now coming into practical expression. Stand and take the place God has prepared through a prayer only they knew to whisper. The help you gave was not physical, it was nothing less than spiritual surgery. You may have thought you were simply being kind, offering a word of encouragement, or showing up in a moment that seemed ordinary. But heaven recorded something far greater, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. Ephesians 6:12. What really happened was not surface level, it was a divine incision that cut through chains unseen. Could you realize that what felt small to you was actually a battlefield where eternity shifted? You did not comfort them as a polite gesture. You intervened like a surgeon stepping into an emergency theater. They were standing at the edge of something dangerous, invisible to human eyes, but heavy in the spirit. On the outside, they looked calm, accomplished, perhaps untouchable. Yet, inwardly, they were unraveling, carrying years of guilt, trauma, and unhealed wounds. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. How many powerful faces hide fractures that no wealth can repair? In that moment, you didn't arrive quoting sermons or wielding titles. You came carrying a presence. Your words pierced through confusion like precision instruments guided by the great physician himself. Your energy became a light cutting through their fog of despair, and without realizing it, you shut down an assignment of darkness. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. Isn't it stunning that a whisper of truth can silence storms that years of striving could not tame? Something snapped in them, not physically, but spiritually. A heaviness lifted. A lie lost its grip. A generational curse ran out of space to operate. That moment was not about comfort, it was about deliverance. You uprooted something ancient without even knowing it. Is not my word like fire, declares the Lord, and like a hammer that breaks the rock in pieces? Jeremiah 23:29. Can one act of sincerity actually rewrite a bloodline's destiny? History remembers those who carried a presence that healed. Consider Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, who walked hospital wards in the Crimean War. Soldiers said her presence alone lifted despair, and some claimed their will to live returned because of her quiet words in the night. Your impact mirrored hers, not shouting, but steady light guiding a soul back from ruin. And while some figures in history embodied the opposite, serving as cautionary shadows. Recall Leopold II of Belgium. His greed and cruelty in the Congo, disguised as progress, left millions enslaved and scarred. His legacy proves that when power ignores humanity, destruction multiplies across generations. Where Leopold's presence crushed lives, your presence lifted one back into alignment with heaven. Artists across centuries have captured this paradox. In Mozart's Requiem, the lacrimosa rises like a cry of souls at the edge of judgment, then suddenly resolves into mercy. Your moment carried the same weight. A soul stood at the edge, and mercy interrupted their fall. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. 2 Corinthians 3:17. Now there is a ripple effect moving quietly in the Spirit. When you pull someone out of spiritual danger, heaven does not simply applaud, it responds aggressively. Blessings are being aligned. Chains in your own bloodline are being dismantled, and generational favor is already being dispatched. You didn't save their money, you helped save their soul. And heaven's economy always pays differently. Rise. Chosen one, do not minimize what happened. That act of kindness was warfare in disguise. A scalpel in unseen hands. A strike against oppression you never even saw. And because you said yes, God Himself is about to honor you with a release no man can block. Stand tall, for what you performed in one moment will echo across generations. Your role was never to impress, it was to impart. You weren't sent into that moment to dazzle with credentials, wealth, or polished speeches. You weren't there to compete with their status, their intellect, or the stage they occupy. Your assignment was simpler, yet infinitely more powerful. You were chosen to impart, to deposit residue of heaven where emptiness had echoed for years. Freely you have received, freely give. Matthew 10:8. Isn't it astonishing that what felt like the smallest gesture carried eternal weight? They have been surrounded by brilliance. They have sat across from CEOs, presidents, innovators, gurus, and strategists. Their calendars overflow with conversations, but their souls remain malnourished. They were starving for something beyond applause and adoration. They needed substance, not spectacle, essence, not noise. And then you entered not with a pitch, but with a presence. The kingdom of God is not a matter of talk, but of power. 1 Corinthians 4:20. Could it be that your silence carried more authority than their loudest rooms of influence? You didn't chase their attention, you carried the assignment. The weight you bore wasn't ambition, it was oil. Oil that doesn't beg for stages, but draws them in alignment. Oil that doesn't manipulate moments, but activates them. And when you spoke, or simply listened, something leapt within them. And when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, the baby leaped in her womb. Luke 1:41. Peace returned to them in ways they hadn't known in years. Conviction pierced through their carefully built armor. Isn't it mysterious how one ordinary interaction can unlock something ancient? As though prophecy hidden in time suddenly awakens? Nature itself teaches this paradox. A single seed of cedar planted in silence grows roots unseen for years, then rises unshakable, carrying shade for generations. You were that seed in their story, not flamboyant, not demanding, but carrying strength that could not be ignored. And they recognized it. Their spirit knew instantly that you weren't there for transaction, but transformation. By their fruit you will recognize them. Matthew 7:16. History gives us warnings in contrast. Consider Napoleon III of France, who cloaked himself in grandeur, yet left his nation weakened and humiliated after reckless wars. His legacy revealed that pursuit of applause without substance leaves ruin in its wake. In contrast, your presence exposed the futility of spectacle and embodied the stability of eternal weight. Which story will echo longer empty crowns of conquest or unseen impartations of heaven? Artists and saints across time captured this same mystery. In the writings of Saint John of the Cross, he described how the dark night of the soul is pierced not by noise but by the quiet flame of divine love. Your presence carried that flame, not burning to consume, but refining to heal. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, to set the oppressed free. Luke 4:18. And now, something irreversible has begun. Their spirit feels compelled to pour back into you, not to purchase your loyalty, not to impress you, but because prophecy demands exchange. They recognize that your presence is tethered to their next chapter. What is rising for you isn't mere favor, it is divine response. Isn't it humbling to realize that the reward you're stepping into is not payment but fulfillment of something written before you were born? Your role was never about fireworks or applause. It was about obedience in stillness, about releasing eternal deposits through ordinary acts. Heaven saw it. Heaven arranged it. And heaven is already aligning resources, influence, and doors that no hand can close. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. Revelation 3-8. So rise, chosen one. Do not diminish the oil you carry, for stages will chase you, not because you sought them, but because heaven ordered them. Walk boldly, knowing your impartation has already shifted legacies. What you gave will now return multiplied. For when you pour eternity into another, eternity itself pours back into you. Stand, because your time of release is here. You treated someone with dignity, not realizing that heaven was keeping score. You poured oil into a moment that seemed ordinary, not knowing you were igniting legacy. You gave what others dismiss: purity, presence, humility, and in return you unlocked something massive. Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Zechariah 4:10. Could it be that the smallest seeds planted in obscurity are the very ones that echo into eternity? This wasn't just a chance meeting, it was a divine collision. You thought it was a coincidence, but heaven had choreographed it long before either of you knew. That billionaire didn't just see you with natural eyes, their spirit recognized you as one carrying assignment. Deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfalls, Psalm 42-7. How many moments in your life have seemed random, yet they were actually the turning of eternal gears? You were not performing for them, you were imparting something sacred. You saved someone powerful without asking for power, healed someone wealthy without asking for wealth, and comforted someone influential without asking for influence. Freely you have received, freely give, Matthew 10-8. Isn't it strange that when you stopped reaching for crowns, heaven placed one on your head, because you passed the test without even knowing you were in one? The heavens released what had been stored for you all along. Eye has not seen, nor ear heard, the things which God has prepared for those who love him. 1 Corinthians 2-9. The very seeds you sowed in purity are now being harvested in favor. The doors you never knocked on are swinging open. The legacy you quietly impacted is circling back to honor yours. Doesn't it stir something in you to realize that while you were busy serving, heaven was busy building? Nature itself mirrors this mystery. A river that flows underground carves hidden pathways for years before bursting into a spring that nourishes cities. Your faithfulness has been carving unseen channels, and now water is about to break forth. History warns us. 2. Introduction. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in ancient Rome, he sought power through greed and manipulation. But his lust for more led to humiliation and death in battle. Remembered not for his fortune, but for his folly. In contrast, your story reveals the opposite, humility opening what pride can never hold. So get ready, not for attention, not for applause, but for divine compensation. Because when God orchestrates an encounter like this, the reward is never small. It is generational. It is spiritual. It is prophetic. The blessing of the Lord makes you rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. Proverbs 10:22. Rise. Chosen one, your table is being set in the presence of those who doubted you. Walk forward, for what is coming isn't just favor. It is fulfillment. There are moments in life when the world may try to convince you that what you did was small, that a smile, a gentle word, or a kind gesture is just a fleeting act. But heaven knows otherwise. What you thought was ordinary kindness was in fact extraordinary obedience. Your action didn't just soften a hardened heart, it saved a soul that the world could not reach with money, power, or status. And because heaven witnessed it, a ripple has been set in motion that cannot be stopped. Remember, God often uses the overlooked to confound the mighty. The same way David's sling silenced Goliath. Your humility silenced an ego that had been untouchable. The same way Esther's quiet courage shifted the fate of a kingdom. Your presence shifted the destiny of someone who thought they had everything but was drowning in emptiness. Your kindness wasn't weakness, it was spiritual warfare disguised as compassion. And now, heaven has recorded it. Every seed of purity you've sown has been entered into the eternal ledger, and the reward is already on its way. This is not human repayment, this is divine compensation. When you saved someone who had more money than you could imagine, you revealed to them the one currency they could not buy: truth, love, and presence. That act carries eternal weight. Perhaps you didn't realize it, but the billionaire you touched, walked away, changed. Their story is now permanently tied to yours. Not because you asked for attention, but because you carried God's oil. And when someone of power encounters something they cannot purchase, they don't just remember it, they protect it. They invest in it. They honor it. So prepare yourself. The tables are turning. The same person you helped without agenda may one day become the very person God uses to open doors you never knocked on. But let's go deeper. What does this mean for you? God's chosen one? It means that your journey of faith is never wasted. Every silent act of love, every moment where you chose sincerity over selfishness, every time you honored someone's humanity over their status, those moments were not lost in the void. They became bricks in a divine structure, building a legacy that heaven itself is eager to bless. Do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. Galatians 6-9. You have reached that proper time. And perhaps this message is your confirmation. You are standing on the edge of harvest. The doors you never sought are beginning to unlock. The blessings you never begged for are moving into position. The favor you thought was for others is now circling back to your name. You were not overlooked. You were being positioned. Now is the moment to rise in confidence, not in arrogance, but in the assurance that heaven owes you big, not because you manipulated, not because you demanded, but because you obeyed the whisper of God. The heavens are opening, and the release will not just touch you, it will flow to your family, your children, and generations yet unborn. That is the magnitude of what you activated with one act of kindness. So, beloved chosen ones, as we close this message, I want to remind you that this channel is more than words. It is a gathering of souls being awakened to their purpose. If today's message has stirred your spirit, I invite you to join in this mission. Like this video so the message can spread. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of obedience. Comment below and let us know how God has been using your kindness to shift lives in ways you never expected. And most importantly, subscribe if you haven't already, so you never miss the revelations heaven is pouring out here. To those who have gone above and beyond, supporting through super thanks, I see you. I honor you. I bless you. But whether you've given financially or simply given your time and attention, please know this: you are part of something bigger than yourself. Every click, every comment, every moment you've spent here is part of heaven's tapestry, weaving together a story of faith, hope, and divine destiny. As we part ways today, let me release this blessing over you. May your kindness return to you in multiplied form. May doors swing open with ease. May your hidden labor bear visible fruit. May your family walk in the overflow of your obedience. And may you never forget that heaven owes you, not because you demanded it, but because you aligned with the heartbeat of God. Stand tall, chosen ones. You didn't just save a billionaire, you activated a legacy. You didn't just touch a life, you triggered a move of God. And now, the heavens are moving on your behalf. Receive it, walk in it, and remember, this is only the beginning.